for their schooling up to the age of 18.
Hi, Fundi. I'm going to just, it's the lighting quite bad. Hi, it's the lighting. Should I just close the, right. Let me sit on my couch.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that better? That's better.
That's much better. That's much better. Yeah. We just have 1 minute to go.
Okay.
Yes. At least you can put the face now to the person who's been trying to get hold of you.
Thanks.
Right.
Trying to orchestrate. You look better than me. I better like orchestrate my yeah. Some people have had in their Zoom. They've put like a screen.
Some artificial thing at the back. Yeah, but I'm not yet able to do that though.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll be going in the next minute. We shouldn't be longer than 20 minutes.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. All right. All right. Greetings to our viewers on the various social media platforms. My name is Dr. Fundile Nyati, a family physician and a head of Proactive Health Solutions. Welcome all to this interview. The purpose of this interview is really a somber type of interview because once again, South Africa has just lost a world-class researcher, a world-class academic, a women's health rights, activist. And so to try and make sense of this loss to the country, I've invited Dr. Glenda Gray, who is the president and the CEO of the South African Medical Research Council. This is an organization where she spent many, many years, built a very good unit there called the HIV prevention unit. And, to a level where it got some global, acclaim. And so I've invited the head of that organization to be able to share with us a little bit about what this loss means, to the country, what this loss means to the scientific community, what this loss means to the world. Welcome, Dr. Glenda Gray. Condolences, firstly, to the family, the Ramji family, husband, and the 2 kids, colleagues like you who worked very closely with her, and everyone who has been touched by her loss. So welcome to our digital platform.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I agree with you. My condolences go out to the family and to her friends and to her colleagues who have worked with her for many years.
Yes. So just to start our discussion, 2 days ago, which was the last day of March. Now we know that March is designated a TB Health Month, and we know that the late Prof did a lot of work around TB and HIV. Sometimes I try to make sense of certain things, and for her to pass on the last day of the month that's dedicated to the work that she's been doing, I put a lot of meaning. But anyway, from you representing the South African Medical Research Council, what does this loss mean, to the scientific community?
I mean, I think it's important to remember Prof. Ramji's trajectory in the HIV research and the HIV epidemic. And so right from the beginning, so when HIV started to unfold in our country, there were some pioneer scientists that decided to work in the field of HIV and dedicate their careers and their lives to HIV. And Gita was one of the first people in South Africa to start to work in clinical research in HIV prevention. And the work that she's most famous for is the work around trying to find a microbicide or an antiretroviral prophylaxis to prevent women getting HIV from men. So Gita and her team very early on realized that with the epicenter of HIV being in KwaZulu-Natal, and young girls being very vulnerable to HIV acquisition, it was prudent to try and find female-owned technologies to try and prevent in HIV prevention in the microbicide field.
Yes, and I mean, the context there also being that, in that part of the world, which is the epicenter of HIV, in some communities, the use of condoms by males, it's still something that they actually refuse to do. So I think her empowering females to take charge of their prevention was something that was quite good. What other areas did she actually contribute in terms of advancing science in the area, in her areas of interest?
So Gita was very involved in the HIV epidemic in KwaZulu-Natal, and so she worked very hard to try and understand some of the risk factors that made women susceptible to HIV. And with risk factors, it's not just only it's the issue of about women's autonomy and the issue of patriarchy and the ability for women to negotiate safe sex as men who and they may be involved in intimate partner violence. And so she understood the social context in which women had to make choices about trying to protect themselves. So some of her work was in the social behavioral aspects of acquisition and also trying to establish risk scores for HIV susceptibility in women. She was also very interested in looking at hotspots of HIV in KwaZulu-Natal and trying to understand which districts and which areas were heavily burdened by HIV and HIV transmission, in trying to find ways to impact at a local level. In terms of HIV treatment, she was one of the first people in the country to be involved in studies that looked at treating early HIV infection. So when women or men were seroconverted, putting them onto treatment in an effort to try and find ways to prevent, to try and minimize infection, also onward infection, also but find ways to manage long-term use of antiretrovirals. So she was very, very involved in that. In addition to her work in HIV treatment and in HIV prevention, the interface between HIV and TB is critical, as you noted. TB is one of our big epidemics. It's, we are heavily burdened in South Africa, and HIV and TB coexist together. And there's a lot of morbidity and comorbidity. So if you have HIV, you're more likely to get TB. And so knowing that HIV and TB go together, it was critical also for work to be done on that interface to try and find ways to manage TB in HIV infected people.
Yes. And I also hear that she also was part of some work in the development of vaccines, again, around HIV.
Yes, Gita and her sites were critical for HIV vaccine research in South Africa. And so she was involved in both HIV vaccine research as well as microbicide research, and has been involved in all the major trials that have been conducted in South Africa. Gita understood where the epidemic was in KwaZulu-Natal, and she created clinical research sites in these areas and created world-renowned and world international units that could do these trials. And it's very hard if you set up new studies in rural areas or in peri-urban areas, you have to develop a whole infrastructure to be able to deliver world-class research. And so she spearheaded these clinics all over KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah. So now, at some point then she left, I think, MRC to join Oram.
Yes, she, in the last 10 months, so in the last 10 months, Gita moved on from the MRC to join Oram. She wanted to transition to a different kind of work stream and to look at more global impact, and also to be able to spend more time with her family that were in England.
Oh, yeah, in England, yeah. Yeah. So now, on the 31st, I'm part of a doctors WhatsApp group, the guys I qualified with in 1989. And that's where I saw the notice that came from your office about her loss. It really was devastating. And I said, in the email that I sent to you earlier, that it actually reminded me of the time where we had just lost Professor Mayosi, who was also one of our leading lights in the country. So this loss of these world-class people, in a country that is said to be in short supply of scientists, what does it do, though, to the research, community, medical research community?
Yes, these are big losses to our country. We have a very small pool of science leaders and mid-career scientists and science leaders. And so these scientists are incredibly important because they are able to do very bold research, and they're also able to build capacity. And so without people like Bongani Mayosi and Gita Ramji, we deprive our whole pipeline of scientists to develop. So losing world-renowned scientists makes us poorer as a nation. It inhibits our ability to respond to important epidemics. And so senior leaders, senior scientists in the country are critical to develop the pipeline of young people coming out of university. And so without these people, one person like Gita and one person like Bongani would develop 20 scientists in their lifetime or even more. And without one person like that, we lose so many more potential scientists. We need science leaders in the country. And so without people like Gita and Bongani, we are robbed of potential and robbed of a future for other scientists.
Yes, and at a global level, what do you think is the impact, of her sudden passing?
Well, her impact, Gita's impact was international.
Yes.
Her impact spread beyond our borders, spread beyond KwaZulu-Natal, beyond South Africa, beyond Africa, and she had major impact both in the US and in Europe. Her work in both in HIV vaccine research and microbicides was critical, and it allowed a collaboration with people in the US. And so the work that she did also contributed to the well-being of people beyond our borders and beyond Africa. And she had many collaborators at a global level, and she leaves a huge gap, a huge hole in our science endeavor, even at a global level.
Yes. Now, how ironic then is it that somebody who dedicated so much of her life to actually, trying to deal with infectious, diseases that are afflicting men, human beings, and obviously the HIV and the TB, twin epidemics. Now, for her to actually succumb to another pandemic, you mentioned in your announcement that she succumbed from complications of COVID-19. Isn't it ironic that we lose somebody through such a a pandemic, an infectious disease pandemic?
It's devastating, Fundi. We think as scientists that we can overcome everything, and sometimes we don't we don't understand, we are beginning to understand how serious this epidemic is. And so her passing is a wake-up call for all of us, because it tells us we're all vulnerable, and that COVID-19 can affect you. As the president says, if you're rich or poor, if you're white or black, or if you live in the cities or in poor communities. And so what her passing has shown is that we're all vulnerable, and no one is safe from COVID-19, and we have to practice the principles of social distancing, of isolation, of quarantine. We have to understand how transmission occurs, and we have to protect ourselves, our family, our scientists, and and the people, our communities.
Now, earlier, I spoke to Prof. Gansin Pillay, the Deputy CEO of the NRF, the National Research Foundation. And because I just wanted to hear also from them about what this all means. And basically, his views are very similar to yours, that this is a huge loss to the country, to the world. He said it's a one loss too many. And one of the things he then mentioned was that what lessons have been learned, and I think you've just mentioned now that we are all vulnerable, with epidemics like these or pandemics like these. They are non-discriminatory. Anybody is at risk. He then posed a question that, how does her work get to be carried forward? So I want to pose that question to you to say, how can her work and her legacy move forward in terms of advancing the medical sciences in the areas that she was actually interested in for the benefit of humanity?
Yes, her legacy will live on forever. Gita has been critical to every biomedical intervention to prevent HIV acquisition in young women, and in men. And so her legacy, the kind of work that she's done, the foundation that she built, the beautiful research infrastructure and culture research in the country will never be lost. And so her legacy will live on, because she's created such a wonderful and magnificent base to move the endeavor forward. So even though she left the MRC to go to Aurum, she left behind a
pipeline
robust,
of up and coming scientists.
Yes, a robust clinical trial infrastructure, a pipeline, and a culture of conducting high quality research. And so she will never be forgotten. She will be always part of our history. When we look back one day and we find an HIV vaccine, or we find an intervention that can prevent men and women getting HIV, we will always look back and say, there were people that we built. There were people who formed, who made the foundation, and we stood on their shoulders to get where we are. And so what Gita understood was that finding an HIV vaccine or finding a microbicide is a marathon. It's a relay, and all of us, we do what we can, and when we pass on that baton, we are never forgotten. We'll never be forgotten. And so her family and her husband should always know that Gita's legacy is inextricably linked. Her legacy is inextricably linked to any HIV endeavor that we do in South Africa.
Yes. All right. No, thank you, Dr. Gray. I think, I had said 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you for the time that you have given to us. We will be, making the link available to you. But I needed somebody who knew her closely and her contribution to medical science. And you've done, an excellent job in giving a picture of the type of person that she was and her contribution. And for that, I want to thank you.
And thank you, Fundi, for doing this and for celebrating her life and doing this to make sure that we never forget her.
Yes, no, she definitely can never be forgotten. It's still a pandemic that we are battling with, that is the HIV pandemic, together with his friend, the TB pandemic. And other people normally say, you pick up the baton or you pick up the spear and go forward, to try and win the war against those twin epidemics. And I think those people who come out of her mentorship and her coaching will continue with the good work. But I want to thank you as well as somebody who's at the helm of the Medical Research Council, and to say, we may lose one person here and another person here, but you know what? The work needs to go ahead, and thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the excellent work that you did even before you went to the MRC. I used to follow some of the work that you were doing at BARA, we call it the perinatal HIV unit. Yes, that you led for quite some time. So please continue with the good work that you are doing and producing more scientists to try and come up with new answers to some of the problems that are facing humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fundi. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.